This prospect update is crazy for Montreal as Mason Blackris, you might know him better, NHL Rank King on Twitter, has done his recent ranking of the top point-producing prospects in the NHL relative to their league. And no surprise, Montreal has the most offensive firepower at the top of the list. We're going to get into that whole list and what it means for Montreal. Plus, there's a huge decision to be made in terms of the Montreal defensive core, as there's 8 guys vying for 6 spots, and someone has to go. Finally, Stu Cowan of the Montreal Gazette says that he believes Sam Montembeault could be a #1 goalie, and we have some interesting thoughts to share on that, all coming up on this episode of Habs Digest. And we're going to start with that, Jesse. Let's start with Montembeault, and this is a big question mark. Not as big of a question mark as the defense, as we're going to get into later. And again, if you're more interested in the, Demidov, Hudson prospect stuff, feel free to skip ahead as well. But this is really interesting. And when it comes to Sam Montembeault, Jesse, a lot of fans really like him. I think most fans like him. I just think fans have a question mark as to whether he'll be that #1 long term. And Stu Cowan shared some of his thoughts. He said last season there were only 14 goalies in the NHL who made more than 50 starts, and only 3 who made 60 or more, that being Saros, Georgiev, and Connor Hellebuck. He said, I can see Montembeault making 50 starts next season. I believe he can handle the workload with Primeau as the backup. But with a young defense, the playoffs will be a long shot, and Montembeault should be able, though, to give the Canadiens a chance to win on most nights. Now, when I bring up his stats, Jesse, again, they're not eye-popping stats, but at the same time, he's been so solid for Montreal. And when we're talking about a #1, we know he can be a #1. That's what he was for Montreal. But can he be that #1 for a playoff contending team? And I want to get your thoughts on this, because I have an interesting thought on this coming up in a minute.
Yeah, definitely. It's a great question. Obviously, he's shown a lot of great steps forward, right? At the same time, but you got to feel like if you're a team contending for the Stanley Cup and not just that playoff team, you might want to have a little bit of that improvement there. That's yet to be determined, though. This year is going to be key, right? Because Montembeault has done pretty good with a really young decor, a team that's in complete, rebuild right now. You have to feel like with next year, this team, they're going to have a little bit more development. It's going to be a stronger team, right? And just for himself, just that experience, from all of last year, getting that starting role, like that's going to be huge for him, right? Not to mention, we'll have a certain Kirby Dach playing a full season. That's right, folks. We'll have a #2 centerman, which is going to help this team a lot, right? So all these factors, then I think it's really fair to make an assessment on Montembeault. I would say for right now, definitely like a 1A, a good, starting goalie in the NHL. But if we're looking at maybe once we get in that kind of playoff contention and once we're in, we're going for it all the way. It's like, I don't know yet if he's kind of that 1A, and I don't necessarily almost see him maybe in that 1B, with just because it seems like we got so many guys in our system that could still kind of fit that role. Obviously, Fowler's a couple years away, right? So definitely you'd have to think that there's maybe even a little bit of a stopgap there if we're really looking to compete a little bit sooner than later. But, next year is really going to be the judge for Montembeault.
Here's my take on this. So I think Montembeault can be a 1A. I think it heavily depends on the team composition. He's a 1A on Montreal. That's what he will be this year. And he'll do a fine job at it, I'm sure. The question is he like a playoff caliber goalie? Is he a cup contending caliber goalie? I don't know, because you can contend with the puck or for the cup with guys like Stuart Skinner, Calvin Pickard, like we've said a few times before. But here's what I want you to do. Just picture Montembeault on your average playoff team. I honestly think Montembeault would be, I don't know if I want to say better, but he would definitely be pretty close to someone like a Georgiev if he played on Colorado. If he played in Carolina's more defensive system, well, maybe last year as opposed to next year where there's some turnover there on the roster, I think he'd be phenomenal too. So there's still a lot of question marks with him, but I think with the right roster, Jesse, the way Montreal's rebuilding, I think he might surprise some people with just how good he can look. But to do that, there's going to have to be a lot of defense in front of him, a lot of good defense as we talked about, and that's one of the biggest other question marks for the Habs this season. Now, this is not a new topic, but it has been discussed a little bit, and there was an article that we wanted to show you. It'll be linked down below, just like Stu Cowan's article from Tyler Major McNichol, I believe is how you pronounce it. He wrote an article writing, could the rotation defenders leave somebody on the sidelines? Montreal has a bunch of defensemen who will be eligible to play with the Habs this season, meaning somebody will rotate in and out. And please go check that article out. We'll link it down below. But I want to bring up the Habs depth chart here on defense, Jesse. There's a lot of names here. And there's a few guys that I think are certainly locks, right? When you have Matheson, you have Savard, who will probably be traded before the end of the season. But we're just going to talk right now in terms of opening night, I think. The opening month of the season is pretty much what we're going to look at. Matheson, Savard, Guhle. So that's your top 3. And then to fill out Your bottom three, I guess, the three that are left, you have Harris, you have Struble, you have Hudson, you have Xhekaj, you have Barron, and you arguably have Reinbacher and Mailloux knocking on the door. What is that, like 7 guys fighting for 3 spots? So when it comes down to it, here's what I think. I think Kent is just going to say, you know what, I'm not going to make a trade unless it benefits the Montreal Canadiens. I'm not going to move a guy just for the sake of moving a guy. I'm going to force you guys to fight it out. Feel like your spot on this team is on the line. I know preferential treatment will probably go to Barron because he's one of these guys that's not waiver exempt anymore. Like, you can send Struble up and down, no problem. You can't do that for Barron. But I think Struble has showed he's been better in the NHL than Barron. Jesse, this is a conundrum. I don't know what's going on. But I kind of like the idea of these guys just going into a bloodbath, forcing themselves to be better and proving themselves worthy for this final few roster spot.
You could view it as a bloodbath or maybe as a game of musical chairs, potato, patata, really, but these spots are getting limited very quickly for the Montreal Canadiens, right? Like, a lot of people are saying now that they expect Hudson to make this team out of camp, which already for a crowded blue line just kind of complicates things even more, right? Like, I call the Kovacevic trade.
Yep.
I would not rule a Harris trade, in the not so distant future. Josh, I think you make a great point that it makes sense, for Kent to wait as much as possible. You want to get as much leverage, as much return on investment you can. But like, with the waiver kind of implications with Barron, obviously that speeds up this whole process, right? So for myself, Xhekaj, fan favorite, he brings a lot to this team. So that uniqueness, being that unicorn again is really his saving grace here. So it's really coming down to me, between Struble and it's coming between, and Barron as well, right? So, and Xhekaj, really those 3 guys battling out the most. I think Xhekaj is getting the most. Even I think Struble right now, I think we'll see a lot of him playing a lot of right D next year, right? Like, for me, he almost still has that leading edge, but obviously with Barron being a little bit older, it'll be his job to lose, right? But that's why I feel like something needs to happen very, very shortly here.
Yeah, it's tough because we saw how they treated Cayden Primeau last year. They stated very simply, we thought he would get claimed, so he stayed on the roster. I don't see them doing anything different for Justin Barron, which means that Lane Hudson now becomes more of a question mark. Like, I think he should make the team, but there are other guys with more NHL experience, and if you're really trying to win games, but then how do you value developing prospects versus winning games when, everyone on defense is a prospect? Like, are you really going to say, sorry, we value developing Lane Hudson more than we value developing Jayden Struble? Maybe you do, but it's such a crazy question. Like, who do you think are going to be the 6 defenders down below? We've asked you this before. Have your opinions changed? Because there's a lot of moving parts, and we'd love to know your thoughts. Final topic, Jesse. This is awesome. This is insane. I love it. Oh, I know the Habs prospect pool is great, and the only other team on here that even rivals them is San Jose, and I would say San Jose's overall pool is probably better, but when it comes to pure firepower, I never felt like I would say this. Montreal is right at the top, as Mason Black, or as, again, like I said, you may know him, NHL rank king, did his PNHLE. PNHLE is just age, position, and league-adjusted point production. It's not a rating, like he says, of how good a prospect is. It's just simply point production scaled for your age, your position, and your league. That's all it is. Lane Hudson at number 4. He's actually below Zane Parekh, which I guess is not that crazy considering how good of a season Parekh had in the OHL. But Lane's was in the NCAA, don't forget. But to be fair, you got Zeev Boyum right at the top, and you got Macklin Celebrini as well. A lot of NCAA names here. Now you'll see Lane Hudson. He's the only Hab on this list, and you will actually see five San Jose Sharks on this list, which is absolutely bananas. But we're not here to talk about the Sharks. Now, I said that Montreal was at the top of this list in terms of firepower. Here's why I said that. Hudson's there at 103, but it's what he said about Demidov right after. So the Habitant, a great Twitter account. They follow Habs. I know we follow them. Fantastic account there. They said, I assume there's not a PNHLE equivalency for the MHL. He said, that's true. The league's too big with too much disparity between the top and the bottom, but I would assume that if there was, Demidov would be 100 plus. And I think that's a very fair assumption. So if we go back and we slot Demidov in at, let's say, 101 because it's 100 plus that would put him right ahead of Matvei Michkov, which is pretty great. Montreal would have number 4 and number 6 on this list. No other team would have 2 players in the top 6, right? Montreal would have 2 of the highest players on this list. The only team with 2 guys that high, which is crazy, Jesse. This is exactly what we've been asking for so many years. Offensive firepower. And we got it not only in terms of superstar Demidov, but in Lane Hudson as well in terms of point production. I know this is just one metric of many, and it doesn't necessarily mean they'll turn into amazing superstars, but I just thought this was too great not to share.
But Lane Hudson's an offensive player, so something showing that's reflective of his production is very much, exemplary of, what type of player that he really is, right? All the same. So you really have to feel like he's a huge riser on this list once again. Josh, is it okay if we cut that for a sec?
Yep.
Sorry, I'll just
let it roll again. You can just start with your point. Pretend I just finished talking, saying how this is crazy. We've been wanting this superstar player for so long. Why is it lagging?
Right.
Hold on. It's super choppy. What is going on? It's me. It's not you. It's that's when you pause OBS, that crap sometimes happens. It gets super. Oh, are we back? I think we're back. Okay, we're back. Yeah. So just start from pretend I just finished speaking.
Okay, awesome.
You can just go whatever. There's no countdown. As soon as you're comfortable, and I'll just cut it together after.
No, that sounds awesome. Yeah, and Layden Hudson's a huge riser on this list again. Love to see him getting that respect again. And, even 101, I would say, is conservative even for Demidov. I think a lot of analysts, if we're actually kind of, translating this, we would have him probably just below Macklin Celebrini once again, right? So that was the big knock on the Habs prospect pool is they had lots of quantity, but not so much the quality. But now with Demidov and then also with the rise of Hudson and him mostly just kind of getting the respect that he's always kind of deserved, right? It's now this takes us to the top to having the best prospect pool in the NHL. For sure, San Jose is doing a great job as well. But nice again that we're going to having some of the very, very best in terms of offense, which is really what this team needs so much. So coming at an amazing time and really loving to see it.
And I think, too, the Habs have built up a nice system to also bring some defense as well. Reinbacher's going to be a fantastic defender. He's definitely not the shutdown guy, but he could become a very good defensive defenseman. And you have Guhle who can do very much the same thing. And in terms of offense, we always talk about Suzuki and the Selke conversation. And you do have some guys coming up that can bring that physicality, that can grind other teams down. Jesse's looking more and more like that perfect playoff roster put together. You got some high-scoring defensemen, high-scoring offensive players. Reinbacher can fill in as that big kind of two-way defenseman as well. Maybe they can look for a big shutdown defenseman in the future, but Jesse, you can get those in free agency, right? What's really hard to find in free agency, I should say, is that top-end scoring, whether it's a forward or whether it's a defenseman. And when you do find it in free agency, you often have to overpay. So honestly, to me, the fact that that's what Montreal has been able to get through the draft over these past few years is absolutely perfect, and I can't wait to see who else they end up adding to fill out this roster.
That's such a solid point, Josh. You have to wonder, is the selection of Reinbacher, was that kind of influenced by some of the D-men that we already had in our system? We know Matheson can play offense, Mailloux, Hudson, right? But being able to balance that out again with Guhle, right, with the Reinbacher type, obviously, that is huge. Then you're having that balance that you really need. You're playing into how the NHL is more offensive centered when it comes to defense more than ever, but obviously still respecting the game and the tenets of what we need to do, right, to be a successful hockey club. So absolutely amazing just to see this overall, how this team is just being made together. And honestly, I think that we're getting a real solid winner here.
Oh man, for sure. It's just exciting. Every single thing that comes out that's praising the Habs and their prospect pool just gets me a little giddy, waiting to see what happens in the coming seasons. And if you guys are excited, share it down below. We love all the positivity, all the excitement about this coming Habs season. It's going to be a blast. But that'll do it for this episode of Habs Digest. If you enjoyed, leave a like, comment, subscribe to the channel. Thank you all so much. As we're on our way to 14,000 subs, we couldn't do this without you guys. I'm Josh Gosse, for my co-host Jesse Poirier. We'll catch you in the next one.